Silencing our phones, that's a good thing to do. Let's see. Well, we have a couple new people here today, I think. Well, we should go around the room, I guess, and introduce everybody. We're going to start with RSM, just because Blair's reaching for the microphone. It's the only time I can correct you. Let's start over here. Let's introduce everybody around the room.
Good morning. Brett Friedman, partner with RSM.
Good morning. Nancy Samuels, accounting.
Morning, Mike Burke, CFO.
Ron Bennett, Audit Committee.
Michael Dixon, Audit Committee.
Joyce Edison, Inspector General's Office. Elizabeth McBride, Inspector General's Office.
Ada Smith, Inspector General's Office.
Luke Chu, Inspector General.
Noah Silver, Audit Committee.
Debbie Manzo, Audit Committee.
Tammy McDonald, Audit Committee.
Frank Barbieri, School Board. Laura Littlejohn from the Office of General Counsel.
Thank you. And who do we have in the audience over here?
Wanda Paul, Chief Operating Officer.
Welcome, Wanda. Welcome. You got cut off. Welcome, everybody. Okay, thank you. First item is the approval of the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. And I also see that we saw a suggestion to change the agenda with the exhibits on it. That might be helpful.
Reformatting.
Thank you,
Reformatting.
Thank you, Mr. Dixon. Appreciate it.
No problem.
We have the minutes. Is there a motion? I wasn't here for the last meeting, so a member reviewed the minutes?
I have a comment on
Yes,
the minutes. We were
please.
going to bring back to this meeting the analysis of the aging of those expenditures in the after-school program. Recall?
Mr. Chairman.
Right. So that's not in the minutes?
I didn't see it.
Okay. Mr. Chu.
Yes, I think we may have overlooked that put in minutes, but we do conduct additional analysis. It's going to come back as a subsequent report to that one to have a clear analysis of the aging for all the receivables from the
So that you don't have that today?
Not today.
We didn't have it last meeting either.
We still work. I think we're still working
All
on
it was an aging that we asked for, because you had one of $59,000 or something.
Yeah, I think we try to do, because it's quite a lot for all the schools.
So you
we
put it
try
on-
to put them in the detail, because many of them were actually inactive for some time. We want to find out the real definition of inactive, and so that we know which one would not have any chance to be recovered.
All right, so let me ask, so what you're doing is you're not just going to, right, you're not just going to produce the report, you're going to produce it and you're going to articulate.
Were you here?
Yes.
Were you here? No?
No.
No. We had a schedule of receivables from all these after-school programs, and there was a big extreme, and the one balance stuck out. And when we asked about the age of that, we couldn't get an answer on it. And we said, we'll do it next meeting, and I had it noted to follow up on it. Do you recall?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Randy?
Yeah.
Okay.
But it doesn't say. Yeah.
Mr.
we'd like
Chair?
to know it.
Yes, sir.
Actually, we are conducting additional analysis of the the accounts receivable. Right now, we found it that at the end of June 30th, 2018, there's an more up-to-date analysis. There was about $500,000 in total accounts receivable. But out of that, over $450,000, or approximately 11%, are related to active accounts. All the remaining 89% belongs to inactive or removed student accounts, meaning that they have not been attending the program for at least 1 or 2 years. So those already out from the program. So actually, the new accounts receivable only account for about if I remember correctly, it's about $54,000, as of June 30th.
So does the rest need to be written off if it's that all? And there's
That is the next question. I think that we have statutory requirement to not allow us to write off the debt. Am I correct, Mr. Bird? And then we try to give this to the staff because it's a policy issue. How are we going to treat the uncollectibles? So what we plan to do is to give Mr. Bird a chance to review it and let him comment on what else can the district do to address the uncollectibles. I mean, that's our plan.
Okay, well, I'd like that opportunity.
Yeah.
Once we get it, we'll dig into it and
Right.
report back.
Okay, so it seems to me, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Bennett.
I thought the after-school program, you had to pay in advance, so why do you have receivables?
No.
You don't have to pay in advance?
No, you
Yes,
are,
they do.
you are to pay
They're
in
required.
advance.
Yes.
Because I used to audit those things, they were always
my kids too.
prepaid.
We got the answer.
So at some of our lower socioeconomic schools, they allow prepayment agreements to have the payments themselves broken up into smaller payments, which sometimes results in them skipping out before they pay their second portion of it. We are trying to
That's interesting.
be parent friendly and understand the different pay that parents have and trying to be accommodating to them. Sometimes in being accommodating, you set yourself up for some of that.
Okay, so it sounds like we have 3 issues. I'm just trying to understand. Thank you. Mr. Dixon, the first one you mentioned was there was one school in particular that had a large balance. Is that
Right.
correct?
That
Okay.
started the whole discussion.
Right, okay, so we'll get to all of it. But so there was one school, right, that had a large balance. And then we've just learned that you're assuming that approximately of the
Majority.
$500,000 total balance, almost $450,000 of that is probably uncollectible.
Correct.
Okay, so that's the second thing we learned. And then we also learned that, I don't know who can answer this, of the $500,000, just for my own edification. This is good that I wasn't here because I don't know. Of the $500,000 total, is it safe to assume that that is all because there are some parents that we allow to pay over time? Is that the entire amount of the?
Without being able to actually
Right.
look at what the different balances are, I would assume a good portion of it is either that, or I would say at some sites we have mismanagement where they're just not collecting when they should be.
Right.
Our department does fiscal reviews every year so that we give principals heads up, like your aging or balance rolling looks like this. We look at the aging every month, and then additionally the IG's office obviously goes out there and does an audit. What I will say is, even though it seems uncollectible, it does go on their delinquent account. So when they go to buy a parking space or prom tickets, usually is when we have parents. I had a parent pay me from 2009 a couple days ago. So yeah, I wouldn't deem it entirely uncollectible. We do still track it. We do, when we had terms, we did still encourage them to put it on fees outstanding for those students. And usually at some point there comes something that they want, like a parking spot or a prom ticket. And
Understood. But there's also another tangential piece of that, which was that, according to Mr. Burke, there could be a policy or statute saying that we're not allowed to write it off?
I need to research that.
Okay, right. So that's good, because your one question brought up all 4 of these, which is good. So that's what we do here. We have something, and then we're going to find out. Mr. Chu.
Mr. Chairman, once we found out the aging for the collectibles, we found there are other issues because it seems that we open up a big can of worms that staff need to respond. So I think we're almost done with the job report. We're going to send out to Mr. Bird and then Michelle for the responses so that we know what they plan to do to address the uncollectibles. I mean, that's why it's being delayed for another
Right.
few weeks.
No, that's good. I'm glad we brought it up. But the interesting part is it in the minutes or it's not in the minutes?
It is.
Okay, it is in the minutes.
It was commented on.
Oh, it was comment on, you were looking for the actual report. Got it. Okay, good. All right, so this will be brought up at a future meeting. We have several questions now that we need to resolve, and Mr. Ben has one more.
You might consider that
Okay,
a long
I'm sorry.
time ago when I was in college, and we went to graduate, and one of the guys down the hall from me. in
Wait,
the
we're
dorm-
talking about like with stone and carving
Yeah,
things.
yeah, no, scrolls back then. But in any event, he went to graduate, and it turns out he had not paid some parking fines from several years before, and he
Yeah.
would not get a degree until he paid the parking fines.
Right.
So you might consider doing that. You don't get a diploma until you pay up, so there's a,
Yeah, well, that's what she's saying, exactly
Yeah.
right, yeah. I agree with that.
I was going to make a similar comment and recommendation to staff to maybe do a review the month before graduation or before the end of the school year and try to collect funds before the year's over so that we don't have that buildup.
We also require that they send certified letters home. And so if after a 30-day period, if the parent hasn't come in and paid, they send a certified letter home and make at least one phone call, which they document on a log.
If the parents don't pay, are the students still allowed to continue participating in the
Per our
aftercare?
policy, when they violate the fee payment agreement, then they're supposed to be terminated.
But I assume it's at the
Does it
discretion of
actually
the
happen?
school.
So that would require the principal allowing the director to enforce that.
Right, exactly. I'm sure there's some discretion there. Okay. We are running schools here. Yes, Mr. Chu?
So as soon as we receive the responses from Mr. Burke and also Michelle,
Yeah.
we will compile them and then submit it to the committee.
Oh, I don't think we're going to let you forget about it.
And then we hope that Mr. Burke will respond in less than 20 days so that we
You
could
get it,
move ahead.
whatever it needs. I have a feeling this issue's been going on for a long time. What we're going to do here, I think, is understand it a little better and maybe for sure understand the amount of it so RSM doesn't say that we're not taking care of it, which is important. And then again, maybe there's some policies and procedures so we could help them understand it so it's not a burden. Okay, that's good. Yes.
Back to the minutes. I think one of your staff was here last meeting. Were you here last month for our meeting?
Yes.
Ms. Smith? I didn't see your name on the minutes.
Ah,
Maybe she didn't sign up on it.
Oh, she didn't sign in?
Yeah, we do that.
I sometimes
should.
don't sign in too, so.
really?
We have to be
We're
reminded.
learning a lot right now. Okay, good. Okay, so where were we? So we're going to approve the minutes. Do you have any? No, I appreciate that. Are there any other comments on the minutes themselves besides that? That was good. Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Well, I think that's the least you could do.
Also, we got
Second it.
Second, all in
Moving
favor?
Aye.
Okay, good. That passes
As amended.
unanimously, Mr. Bear. Okay, next item on the agenda is the, public comments. Does anybody want to comment on how we behave? Nothing yet? Well, the meeting's still early. Hold your, you'll have an opportunity. Okay, we have an audit report. What is this, Mr. Chu? Unannounced on-site observations of school bus safety devices. Who's going to present that?
Mr. Chair, we have our staff, Ada Smith. She's the one
Excellent.
coordinating the audit because we did the site visits in all 6 compounds, so it took several auditors. But Aida was the one coordinating it and put together a report, so we like for her to present the report today.
I think that's excellent. Thank you.
Good morning. Today we're going to talk about the unannounced on-site observations of the school bus. Now, this was a follow-up of the school bus safety devices report that we did back in 2017. And this is actually the second follow-up to that report. A couple of the things that we went out to look at was the post-trip passenger check, which is the child reminder. In the picture at the bottom, you can see that the driver is walking to the back of the bus to make sure that the bus has been is fully empty. On number 2, we're looking at the student crossing arm to ensure that it's working when we went out to look at the buses. Number 3 is the video camera to determine if the camera is flashing within 20 seconds of turning on the bus. And number 4 is the mandatory safety inspections that they are done within the required 30 days. Okay, Table 1 is a summary of results back in 2016. I'm sorry, it looks a little blurry. But we looked at a total of 89 buses, and we saw that in the 89 buses, there were 55 of the child alert systems not working. We went out and we did a second follow-up back in September of 2016, and the numbers reduced. It went down to just 11 child alert systems not working. Okay, and then the most recent follow-up, which was in January 7th of this year, 6 auditors went out to the 6 compounds, and we selected 10 buses, and we discovered that there were 8 child alarm systems not working. Okay?
Wait, 8 out of 10? You said just like the 10 buses.
No, I'm sorry, 10
Out of
in
60.
each compound, so
Right,
60.
right, right. Okay,
60.
16 total.
60 buses in total, yes.
Okay.
Okay, so there were 2 cameras not working on that day, and then there were 5 child alert systems not working and 3 crossing arms not working. Okay?
And can I ask a question on that one? Whenever you went out, were these the same vehicles you were looking at to make sure that they had been corrected, or they're all a different?
Random
Random, okay.
buses.
And, okay.
You have a follow-up
I'll let
question,
you finish. Yeah.
Why don't you follow up with the question? I know you're thinking.
Okay, and then this is a comparison summary of the 3 observations. So we started with 89, and then in September 2016, and then the most recent one. So as you can see, the non-working system has greatly reduced. And when we did go out and we found that there were any issues, we communicated with management immediately so that they can repair the buses.
And then I think this is important to point out that during our first site visit in 2016, we found out 35% of the samples we reviewed, there were manual tampering for the child alert system. And this time we found 0. So that's very encouraging.
Well, that's good to see. That's one good.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll do my follow-up
you.
questions now. Policies. So who is responsible for identifying whenever they're not working? And then did anyone look into, was that information reported in the time frame from when it was reported to when it was supposed to be corrected?
I think that's our next finding.
Okay.
And also, and I also would like to point out that it's because that, to some extent, that we know the bus has issue. So during our January 7 site visit, we identified those buses with the problem, and then we went back to look at the same buses in 2 weeks to make sure they are all corrected, and they did. They correct all those buses. And we told staff, rather than do an announced visit to sample, it would be more efficient to make sure those being identified were corrected.
And I appreciate the follow-up, but I guess my question even before that, who's responsible for identifying and turning it in accordance with the policy?
Okay.
And was that done and it just,
We also have transportation department here that maybe they can come up and address
Yeah, come on
some
up.
of your questions.
Come join the party. We got room, Mr. Burke? Excellent.
Good morning, everybody.
Welcome.
Good morning.
To answer your question, it is the director's responsibility to make sure that if we get anything back from the auditors, to make sure that my team review the information and respond immediately to it.
I guess my question goes even before that, because it shouldn't take an audit to see that there's a very important identification system on the bus for that's not working. So who's responsible for checking that and identifying if it's working or not?
We have a 30-day inspection for all buses, and that's where that should be caught, and that is done every 30 days. It is
Okay.
an electrical equipment, so we could have done it correctly
Correct.
this 30 days and when they
Understand.
come out.
Okay.
Every bus,
Every bus.
every bus.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
may I ask a question? So isn't the bus driver responsible for checking that before he leaves the bus compound?
Yes, the bus driver is responsible for checking prior to leaving the compound, but when the auditors came out on that morning, the bus drivers probably had not seen that bus at that time. And these electrical devices, they could break on a dime.
Well, it sounds like they do.
They do.
Mr. Chairman, that leads to our next conclusion, that all the discussions were related to who did the inspection, what else would happen. So we request for a pre and post-trip inspection, which is supposed to be done by the driver. We found out 11 of them were not able to provide us with the inspection report.
There you go.
And then this is something he was talking about. So we asked them again, but within, I think, a couple of weeks, we still haven't received it. So we take it as it is, that 80% had no inspection report that they need to correct it.
Okay, thank you.
All right, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, why don't you continue?
Let you
Okay,
finish.
yes, so the pre and post-trip inspection report would be the opportunity for the driver to say that the arm is not working or the child alert is not working. So if we have 11 forms that were not completed of the 60 buses, then there was no way for management or the mechanic to know that there was an issue. So,
The drivers driving the same buses all the time? Most of the time?
For the most part, most
Okay.
of the time.
Just want to understand. All right, go ahead, continue on.
okay, and the fourth conclusion is the mandatory safety inspection reports. We wanted to determine if the 60 buses were inspected as required, and all of them were. So back in 2016, we had 5% of the 89 buses were not inspected timely, but this year in the random observation, they were all inspected timely.
Okay, so I read the report in some detail, and it seems that the problems are in two of the compounds for the most part, Royal Palm Beach and North. I also noticed that the response indicated that supervisors were being hired and team leaders or bus leaders or whatever. My question is, are they being hired in the two locations where there are problems? Are those locations understaffed? How do they compare with the others that are doing a good job in terms of staffing? Is it a staff problem or something else?
As mentioned in the response, we have actually hired, that's one of the things that we looked at over the past year, where our deficiencies were and where the oversights could occur. We did hire 3 team leaders in that area, and the focus has been to pay attention to these things and get them all resolved. So the staffing, it has been improved in all areas in transportation, and we continue to look to do so. Continue to do that over the next couple of months.
Okay. So my question was a little bit more specific. The areas where there seem to be problems are in, and let me commend you on improving tremendously over our last review, but the areas of concern seem to be Royal Palm and the North bus compounds. Is that where you focused your staffing, your additional staff, or is it spread out? I'm
It's
just trying to
spread
get a
out
feel.
over all the facilities, inclusive of the Royal Palm facility and the North facility.
Okay.
The
Is there
increase
anything?
was to address the entire transportation department, including those 2 units, yes.
So has there been any specific focus on those two where it seems like there are problems? Or it's just been district-wide?
We looked at it as a global unit of, because we, as mentioned in the audit before, there was a problem with that many units being defective. So we addressed it globally, and we continue to address it at every facility, because for the safety issues, we're looking at every single facility so that when anyone comes back there, just like we found with the buses being 100% inspected, we're looking for that to occur every day with the
And if I may, in the spirit of transparency, we've had some personnel challenges over the last several years in transportation, and that has impacted the quality control that we know we need. And so with these new hires, it's our expectation that that will improve.
Thank you.
And just a follow-up question or comment, because really it starts from the bus driver, if I understand it. Policy is at the end of the day, the bus driver is to check the bus, and if the child alert system, which is very important, is not functioning properly, then they identify that and report it. That's step number 1, right? And that's where we think that we had a breakdown because 11% were, the reports were not done.
Not available.
Okay.
Is that the beginning of the day or the end of the day?
They do a pre and post trip, so
Okay.
they're required to document anything that is not, that is safety related. And so that's part of, and I've ridden several buses, and that's part of what the buses I've ridden, they've done. But again, we know that, it's in identifying the right people to hire, to drive our buses, and in the management, the leadership side of it. So we are definitely aggressively working on that.
Because you're only going to get it every 30 days, but the bus drivers, or reported by a bus driver,
Yes,
correct?
The bus driver
Okay.
reports it every day. We get it every 30 days from the mechanics.
Yes, and the final slide here is showing what the pre and post-trip form actually looks like, and if they noticed that there was, the arm was broken in the morning, they could, get it fixed throughout the day or at the end of the day. So there's a lot of areas here such as the, whether it's the child alarm or the brakes or the camera system not working, they can note that immediately. However, they have to do the form in order for it to be flagged.
So the forms for 18, for the percent that we look at, were not available. So we want to make sure that they fill it out and then action is being taken by the staff.
Okay, I have a couple of questions.
Yes,
Number one, I didn't see it in the report. Approximately how many buses are there? Is that in there?
No, I was looking for that.
I'm sorry, say it again.
869.
869. You got it?
869. Okay, so
the sample-
in your opinion, the sample of 60 is good for the 869?
Many of them are brand new.
I understand, I'm just wondering.
As a follow-up, yes. Initially, we did almost 90.
I saw that, right. Okay, but we went from 90 down to 60, that's all I was wondering, and 869, so that's, I can do my math, it's a little less than 10%. But for statistical sampling, Mr. Bennett, you comfortable with that?
And I have a comment. Out of
Yes.
869 buses, 52 of them are school-based. They're located in the respective schools for activities. So for our complete fleet, we have 869. But during the time of the audit, they went to each facilities where we have 869 minus 52.
So that's a very good point, thank you for bringing that up, which
52.
leads to a question.
What about the 52?
You're taking all my thunder. What about you? Are those 50,
It's not that hard here. No, come on.
are those 50 inspected on a 30-day basis as well?
Absolutely, all of them.
69 are inspected every 28 school days.
Okay, so those 50 are inspected?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so it's a sampling of a little less than 10%, which I think is reasonably, makes sense for the world we're in.
Yeah, you
Okay.
can go look at the sampling tables and figure out what your confidence in.
Right, that's what I'm saying, right.
What is it, 95% probably at, with a sample size of 60 out of 800? I can't.
Yeah.
Statistical sampling is not my strong suit, okay?
And
you're
if
the
it makes you feel a little more comfortable
You're the
as well.
expert here. Okay,
If it makes you feel a bit more comfortable.
Yes.
Of the 869, we have 654 route buses that are actively on the road every day.
right, about 700.
Right.
Okay, we're just looking at percentage. RSM, do you concur? A little less than 10% about?
Yes.
Okay, so we're okay. I just want to make sure, I don't want anybody to leave the room saying, wait a minute, why'd you only do 60? I mean, that's normal in our world. We're comfortable with that. We're not necessarily comfortable with what's happening, but the sampling size is probably painting the proper picture for the entire fleet. I just wanted to make sure that point was brought across, better or worse. I'm almost done, Mr. Chu. Next question. I don't know if this would be good or bad, but it seems like some of these devices would be known by the actual riders of the bus as well, besides the bus driver. For instance, the arm or the camera. So I'm just opening up a can of worms here. I'd like to open it up for discussion. We have a hotline. Is this an appropriate thing to put a sign on every bus saying if you don't see the arm working, or if you don't know the camera's flashing or something like that, I bet 95% of these students have phones, and maybe some of them want to be junior detectives. Is that something that would be good or bad in our world? Because I have a feeling they know if the arm's going out or not, and they can see if the camera's flashing. I'm just opening it up for discussion. I don't know if I'm opening up a can of worms where we're going to get a bunch of crank hotline calls, or do we put a sign on everything and we have everybody telling us? And then my follow-up question is, in all due respect, these buses are not wired, so you don't know, you have no way of knowing at the depot whether these items are working or not working. They have to be visually checked.
Yes.
You can't get a sensor to beep and say it doesn't work.
No.
Okay.
Not for the stop arms.
Right, so we can't do that. And I'm assuming with the technology we have, it's a common practice that they fail. They must be failing quite a bit.
I would,
When I say,
it's not as bad as it seems in terms of how they fail. They could fail because they're electronic devices, and you never
Right.
know when that could happen. But the failure rate on them is pretty good. They're not.
okay,
No.
all right. So do you think it's worthwhile to let the riders of the bus call an 800 number saying that the arm's not working, or are we going overboard?
I think you would be going overboard.
Okay.
I think the employees need to do their job,
That's
which
it.
is with the inspections, and it sounds like that's what they're trying to address with the training.
Right. The only thing, what I was concerned about was that there was forms that weren't filled out. So if something's broken and there was no form filled out, I didn't know if the watchers needed watching. But if you guys, I understand, listen, we know about transportation, and I agree. It's much better and it's very good. I didn't know if we needed to go to that step or not.
I don't think if I may weigh in, I
Yeah.
don't think we need to go to that step, but I think we need to be more vigilant in terms of the pre and post trip. I think we need to invest more in training our drivers, which we have a pretty aggressive training program we're going to roll out in the next FY. So I think that's where it starts. And so, when you have new drivers, it's important that you take the time to make sure that they understand, how to do it correctly. So I think we need to, it's just putting more emphasis on it and checking.
Okay.
And then just ensuring that the supervisors are verifying that those are being done too.
Absolutely.
So-
Right. Okay, good. So, I mean, overall, it's pointing issues out, but overall, it's gotten significantly better,
Thank you.
right? Well, we know that.
It has.
Right. And the audit did a very good job determining that. And we're comfortable that the audit and the statistical findings are reasonable for the entire fleet?
Yes.
Okay. I think so. All right. Any other questions?
Do you need a motion to accept the report?
I do.
I move to accept the report for the school bus safety devices.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor of accepting the report?
Aye.
Aye, okay. Passes unanimously, Mr. Blair? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'd like to mention that our vice chair has shown up, David Talley.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Transportation has some updates. I want to provide you with the safe driver standards for the white fleet drivers that related to our report presented in February.
Okay. Absolutely. Who's going to do that? On the agenda. Oh, wait, where did Ian go? She left? Thank you. Where'd she go?
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Forgive my voice, I'm still getting over something. For the safe driver standards, we are implementing safe driving standards and updating for our yellow fleet and implementing for our white fleet. So the plan is to bring those two things together and present it to our board at the same time. So it would be a combined safe driver plan with different standards for our white fleet and our yellow fleet, obviously, but in the same document. So that's what the plan is right now for that. And then in terms of reaching out to other municipalities, I have reached out to Broward and Miami. I have not heard back from them yet, but I also do have a contact here in the county. So we are in conversations to make sure that we're aligning with other municipalities that are in a similar situation to us.
Good. Thank you. Appreciate it. Look forward to it. Thank you, Randy. I'm sorry, Mr. Law. Okay, where are we? Internal funds audit. We have a management letter, Mr. Chu. Who's going to present that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. We have Susie Kay. She's the one coordinating with the internal funds audit. So I think she would like to introduce our staff auditors who
Hi.
work on internal funds.
I would.
Thank you,
Good
Susan.
morning. I have, I think, 4 of our 5 here. Please stand up. This is Anna Santana in the front, Nicole Eng, Andres Ortiz, and Barbara Reynolds. Sorry, I've known her for 15 years. And then Alonzo Peterson, whom a lot of you know, was not able to be here today as well. And this is my crack team that gets all of the 175 schools out in a very compressed period of time. And I'm very proud of them, and they do a very good job.
Thank you.
Great.
So we're here to celebrate, I think. They don't, but I think it was a pretty good year. Those that are new to this, internal funds, just some background. I always explain it to people that are not familiar with it, that the internal funds is, every school has a checkbook, and in that checkbook there's many buckets for the field trips and the class accounts, and we have a single treasurer at every school who is maintaining that checkbook and the records for all of those clubs. So it's monies that are collected and expended within a school. Could be for football games, could be for a field trip, fundraising, and it's things that are not typically funded through our general budget, but it could also include grant money as well, that they might have gotten a grant at the school. We have 175 schools, as we mentioned before, broken down as you can see up there. In 2018, there was a total district-wide revenue of $82 million and disbursements of $81 million. The fund balances for all schools, June 30th, was $19.8 million at the end of this last school year. I throw this up here just as a FYI. This is your average balance of schools broke down by level and area or region that we now have. It goes all the way from the highest balance last year was Jupiter High School at $990,000 in their bank. The lowest was Odyssey, but they closed at the end of last year, and we opened West Tech, so they actually had the smallest amount at 15. This just this gives you a 15-year feel of how the growth we've had since I started here in 2004. The red line represents the number of schools, and the blue bars represent the revenues that we take in every year at those schools. And I just want to point out that since 2004, we have never increased the size of the audit staff to handle that.
Wait, leave that chart up for a second.
Yeah, leave that up for a second.
That's interesting.
You can see after the 2008 economy crash, you can see where things went down a little bit. And just in the last 3 years, it's finally kind of recovered.
So we've had the same number of schools since 2011?
Yes.
That line's straight, correct?
Yeah, this current year that we're in, we're down one school. We're
Okay.
now down to 174.
Okay. And the revenues?
And understand, these are schools that have internal accounts at the school, because we have alternative schools and DJJ schools. They don't maintain an internal accounts at their school. This is just those schools, which are your basic elementary, middle, and a few of the other and alternatives. But
Okay, it's a good chart.
Can I just ask, could you go back to the previous slide? What was the average balance?
54,
well, your median balance at the schools is 54,000.
55.
Is that for elementary?
That's for everybody. That's for 175 schools. The median is 54,000.
Where's that at?
At the very bottom.
At the bottom, thank you. But let me ask you a question. The program itself, this is not an auditing type question, it's just for my understanding. There's $19 million in all these accounts now?
On June 30th.
At June 30th.
At June 30th,
At June
okay,
30th.
the date we're talking about. Aren't these programs supposed to be collecting money and paying money out within a period of time for a particular program? How do they accumulate so much money? I mean, how does a school have $990,000?
Marcy, you got any better answer for that
I
than
don't-
I do?
I'm just from my
I just know
understanding.
that over time, you just get accumulation.
Yeah, I understand that. Obviously, there's accumulation, there's a lot of
He's looking,
accumulation.
Mr. Dixon's looking for a trend to understand what's happening. For
Well,
instance,
these schools are in business.
well, for instance, Mr. Dixon.
Individually.
No, what you're saying is, it's interesting because 81 million came in and 80 million went out.
Yeah.
So the question is the balance always somewhere there, and what is that balance, right?
Well, I saw the 81 in, 81, 80
That's what I'm
out. So
saying.
That's a
But the
million
ba-
bucks,
right.
$1 million net.
Right.
This is a 19-year
Right, so you want to know, is that
accumulation
19 million about to go out, or is that 19 million the
program.
static
I don't-
number, and it's
no,
always there?
I think it's a static number.
Well, that's the question. Does anybody have an
It
answer?
creeps up and down each year, I do know that.
But does it creep up?
Like 10 million one year, 19 the next, or?
Is it a timing? The question is it 19 million, because we're looking at a balance sheet. Is that a timing issue, or is the fact that there are static balances at all these schools year after year after year? That's the initial question he's asking. Then he wants to know why.
I think
Andrew,
part of
probably
it's
better.
just kind of school principals being a conservative group and maybe trying to retain some level of balance. Part of it may be multi-year funding efforts if they know they're going to replace you know,
But they're building up
band
for capital
uniforms
reserves.
or, yeah, sometimes these are, they may be working towards a major purchase that takes a couple of years to
So-
fundraise.
So, Mr. Burke, I know you don't have the information in front of you. If it's 81 coming in and 80 going out, and that's 1 million, are you saying almost every year that's happened and we've built our way up to 19 million over the last 25 years? Is that what we're thinking?
I think there's, yeah, I mean, I need to go back and look and see how that 19 million has fluctuated from year to year, but I suspect it's kind of gradually grown.
So then the question is that, are we're looking at it as an advisory board. Is that something that should come to, we should look at and understand a little better? Is this a business? What are they doing with it? I think that's what Mr. Dixon's getting to. Or is that a normal function and it's innocuous? Nancy?
If you go back a couple of slides, there is there's about $8 million at the end of the year that's included in a trust account. So that would be potentially for a specific purpose that they're saving money for. It might be a couple more, or look at your page 3 in your document.
Oh, okay, that's in the report. I don't have that up here.
Oh, okay. So there is $8 million at the end of the year that the principals are setting aside for a specific purpose.
Okay. That's understandable. Then there's 11
And then when you
million.
think about the rest of it, if you spread it over 175 schools,
Right, you have an average of, well, the 8 million minus the 55, maybe you're at an average of 30,000 a school average.
right, I
Right,
mean,
so
they
your average
have
of
to have some sort
30,000
of a
a school.
carryover to start the next year.
Right. So that's not so bad. Then it leads to, if all that we accept, which I do,
Right.
then the conclusion is Jupiter High, are they accruing a reserve for something
Yeah,
specific?
they may have a large field trip that they're about to go on,
Right.
for the next year that they've had to save several years. If they're going out of state, they may have to save several years in order to get to it,
Band trips are
A
very
band trip,
expensive if they're taking a band out of state.
Or it could point out, as I think Mr. Dixon's saying, it could point out to an aberration where somebody's building up I don't want to use the word negative, like a slush fund type of thing, and we need to know about it because that could be dangerous if there's that much money sitting around at a school site. Yes, Mr. Law.
Yeah. In addition to that, there's another thing is the internal funds on a cash basis. And then
Right.
may have a lot of outstanding bills that have not come to the school yet. So
Right,
they
well,
may
that's why
have-
we were wondering, is it 19 temporary?
Correct.
So, right, well, it's going to go down to 8
Correct.
if everybody had no balance, which we assume might be the case, but it seems like it's going to be somewhere above 8, it might not be a full 19. Do we have the ability technologically to see how that balances on a monthly or daily basis? How does that work?
We could run reports that are consolidated.
And would that help us at all? Are you concerned, Mr. Dixon, that there could be some schools that have a high balance?
Yeah, I would like to see the balance next meeting, what the balance is.
Okay, but
As of March 31st.
By school or by district?
In total, I mean.
well, in total and by school to see if anybody jumps off.
No, I don't want
well,
you to go out and do this big report.
The
No, no, I'm thinking it could all be done electronically, right?
Yeah, well, I don't know.
I just want to make sure it's
The
clear.
balance at the moment is probably going to be higher than this because they're going to have a
Middle
lot of,
school.
you're going to have prom, you're going to have a whole
Right.
lot of activities that are going to
June
happen
30th.
between now and the end of the school year. They're going to pay
Right.
most of their
Next
bills.
June.
They're going to,
Yeah.
so a March 31st is going to be a higher number.
There you
I'm just
go.
going to warn you that.
Right, of course, I would think so.
June 30 last year.
Just do the prior year end.
Okay.
You
That
got
is
those
the-
balances anyway.
This is the prior year end.
Yeah, I
here.
understand. This
Year
is a
before
summary,
that?
but I think you're talking about individual school by school. You want to see a list of each of them, right?
Now, I'm a little confused with the 81 in, 80 out, and there's 19 million sitting there. I mean, I just don't get the numbers right. I understand there's programs, 3-year programs to send a band 100 grand or something, whatever it is. But the numbers are getting big, and maybe we should understand it a little bit more.
Well, I think the first step is to understand it a little more, so I agree with you. So if we can do it electronically and just somehow get some type of analysis of how this balance moves around by school, maybe we just see if there's something that jumps off the page, and maybe it's something that we need to look at.
Well, you
That makes sense.
should have the year-end balance. You do the audit at year-end every year. Was that June 30?
Yep.
So look at the last couple of 3 years. Just
Well,
the year-end balance for each
17, go
school.
back to 17, 16?
I understand.
It's
16,
been
That's a start.
around 17 to $19 million
Yeah, that's a
for the
start.
last 3 years.
Staying the
Yeah, I
same.
mean, you got
Right.
175 rows and 3 columns. That's, 500.
I have it, I just
You
don't
got
have it
that?
here with me.
It would stand to reason to me, though, when you look at the change in the fund balance, and it shows the receipts and the expenditures, they're very closely aligned, so it would seem that they're planning, the schools are planning something, and so they collect money for that something, and they pay for it, and the excess probably is carried forward at that level from year to year to year. Just looking at it, it would seem. My question, though, is what is that $8 million in trust for? What is represented in that? That's a large number.
Sounds like it's like a capital campaign fund or something.
It's something the schools are saving money in order to have a larger purchase.
Nancy, it also
So then
includes
the
your
other,
after-school
the athletics, the
program.
music, the classes, the clubs, and so forth,
After
those,
school is also in there.
Yeah, the after-school
Susan.
programs are included in the trust accounts,
Because- yeah.
community schools, the night programs, things that are designated. Rental, leasing.
so would it be reasonable to think that in the other departments, the transfers, the receipts and expenditures should be pretty much zero out or closely come to a point where they pretty much almost zero out, maybe with small balances instead of $1
Well, that's why
million
we're wondering why,
across the
if you
board?
subtract, if you take the 19, you subtract the 8, that's why that's what the question. What is the other, I can do that math. What is that other amount? So that's the question. And it seems to be slowly building over time, so we just want to understand it so we can be proactive. Right, the 8 million seems to be justified in each school, and they have to, of course, account for it, and we know about it. The other balance, if it's 81 and 80, if every year there's $1 million, as I said, do we want it to continue to grow? Is that a good thing, or is that a risk that we need to understand in what's happening at the schools?
I don't think that's our topic. I mean, I don't think that's relative to this committee.
No, it's.
That's a school issue, school board issue, whether or not they want that to grow or not.
I understand that, but in all due respect, the school board won't know about it until we look at it. And
I got it.
Right.
I got it.
Yeah, so, right, we need to present it to them. Okay, so we'll get some more information on it,
I will have
and we'll make
something ready for-
decisions. But we got sidetracked, because that has very little to do. I mean, I appreciate what you're saying, but it has very little to do with the audit of the school, so please continue.
No problem. Audits, this is the authority for why audits are done at the school level every year, which is in the report as well. This is looking at a 5-year trend. You can see that there has been, this is showing you the reaping of the benefits of the accounting department and the massive training they've been doing in the past several years. So you can see how the number of total conclusions has dropped, where the number of schools with no material noncompliances has climbed. It flattened out a little bit this last 2 years, but definitely good.
Still good.
So in a little bit, of course, we said that the number of schools with no findings this year reportable. And of course, most schools have some kind of minor findings, but we do a lot of verbal. If you see it here, it's because there was a trend or we saw something that was more, substantial than just a little minor thing. And we report by the number of schools. So a finding, there may be several fundraisers had an issue at a school, but we report it as one check mark at that school for that, for fundraising. This is schools without findings. We had 47 this year, and the 23 listed there went 2 years straight with no finding. Getting into a little more detail, when we looked at the disbursement transactions, we look at areas where there's no supporting documentation, which of course that's, one of the more serious issues of every disbursement should have something to support what they're paying and the purpose for it. But it was only at the 12 schools that, it's much improved in the years. Same as insufficient. We're looking for details of purchase as opposed to like a packing list that doesn't have the details and the pricing. We look at authorization of transactions, whether purchase orders were issued in accordance with the district policy. We have a $1,000 threshold in the district that if they're going to spend that much, a purchase order should be issued first or signed by the principal. Contracts signed by staff other than the principal. Only the principal is authorized to sign contracts or commitments for the school. So we always look to make sure that the yearbook sponsor isn't signing in the principal's behalf. as an example. Vendors performing services on campus, this has been looked at a little stronger in the last few years because of Jessica Lunsford Act. We want to make sure that anyone who is in contact with our students has been properly cleared. We're also looking at the contracts in terms of making sure that they're properly executed.
The number went up this year from 11 to 20?
Yes.
So it got worse.
Well, this was a blip this year. It's been, if you were to follow that trend in the prior years, you would have seen where that went down tremendously.
I wonder what happened, why they relaxed.
Maybe, like you said, could have
So
been.
who's relaxing? Is it the people at the front that let them in? Or is it the principal? Where's the relaxation there? Because that's not a good trend.
It's something that'll be addressed with the training again. We looked at revenue transactions, and you'll see where we've continued to improve in terms of completeness of use for the drop safe log and the money collection process. We look at the compliance with the procedures, continued improvement in terms of the timeliness of deposits. The teachers are getting the deposits in every day as they're supposed to. Revenue transactions, we looked at compliance, again, continue with the money collection procedures. The inventory of pre-numbered documents is something that you'll see is major improvement because, again, accounting has implemented new procedures in the past 2 years that have massively improved the process. They now have assigned document custodians that are keeping the inventories up to date. Fundraising activities, we still have some issues in terms, even though there is fundraising training, you still are working with a cadre of teachers whose first responsibility is teaching. And if they want to raise money, they don't always remember they have to fill in paperwork to do that. So.
They don't take the time, they know.
So we had, in terms of training, we still run into schools where the sponsor did not necessarily complete the training. We look again at authorization of the fundraising, which is done through the fundraising application form. If the form is missing from the files, we have no way of knowing that the principal had, pre-knowledge of the fundraising activity. We also look at the sales item inventory report. At the end of the fundraiser, the principal signs to acknowledge if there's any inventory remaining.
A question. On this particular slide, there's no reference to the prior year. Why?
I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't know. That was just a fault on my part.
Okay.
Apparently, I didn't do it with any of these, and I apologize. Insufficient or lack of documentation might be where the sales item inventory report was missing, or they didn't use it for a particular, for that activity when they should have, or incomplete sales item inventory reports where they'll not complete it correctly. They'll maybe put in instead of putting down the sales price of an item, they put the cost of the item. So it's not being used to reconcile collections to the accounts. Ticket sellers' reports are a separate form that are used in the event of sales when they, anticipate certain levels of sales for football games or dance or something like that, where pre-numbered tickets are going to be used. As far as when we say inaccurate information, it has to do more, again, like I was saying, might have the cost as opposed to the price, the sales price. So based on available records, the purchasing records and the sales, records that are available, we went way down from 27 to 19 schools that showed maybe a revenue shortage on the sampled fundraiser. That was much improved. And then we still run into occasions that we use a decimalized system of accounting where there's a primary account, say, for the student council, and then if they have a dance, then it's that account number .01. And if they have a fundraiser, it's that account .02. So the district uses that type of a decimalized system, and if they don't decimalize an activity and they commingle it, then it gets a little more muddy. So it's one of our comments. We looked at leasing of school facilities, which over the years has pretty much dropped to these two conclusions having to do with either the signatures on the leases or the advance payment. Everything else is done through an electronic, our Tririga system, which maintains documentation as far as insurance. We have, at the district level, they're reviewed and signed off on. So it really just comes down to making sure that the people are paying in advance and that the leases are being signed in a timely manner.
So Susan, is there, I mean, leases have come a long way, obviously. Is there anything, you don't need to tell us now, but maybe you or your staff have some recommendations on these two, since we're almost down to making it completely.
I'm not sure.
Great. I know, maybe right now, but maybe there's some way that we can tighten up those two areas.
Well, Nancy,
Because we
I
are
think you
dealing
changed the.
We are dealing with third parties, and third parties know they need to sign the lease and they need to know the pay. So if there's some way we can have that, something put in maybe, I don't know.
Haven't they made it that it's mandatory to pay online now, or?
Not yet.
Not yet? I
Okay,
know
so
they were
that
moving
might,
towards
so that, if we move to pay online, that will help the second one,
Oh.
right? Because we'll know that, right?
So
And then the signature of the lease,
sometimes
pro
I think it has
witnesses.
to do with comfort level, where they've got long-term lessees too.
comfort level meaning,
You have a church that comes every week,
right,
and they're familiar with the people, so
right.
paperwork might slide.
Oh, I see.
So for the
Yeah.
current fiscal year 19 end, these numbers will probably be about the same,
Hopefully, there'll be less.
hopefully.
Right,
But if we haven't changed anything, any procedures, right, yet, to date?
right, correct.
And I can't really answer the question because I don't know.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. So maybe there's something we can do with those two, because there used to be a lot of lease issues.
Accelerate the process
Yeah.
is what can be done.
So,
Accelerate, whatever this
well, one is for
program
the
is to get the funds
electronically.
electronically,
Right, that would be the second one.
which hasn't been implemented yet.
I know it was discussed, that's why I
It was
asked.
discussed, okay. So that could be a,
You said something a few minutes ago about insurances. It has nothing to do with funds. It's just a thought about liability. Do the third parties that you lease the facilities, do they have to have certificates of insurance? Are we ensuring that that's done? Is that a
Yes,
part of the
that's why
audit
you-
process
And
too?
it's very well done, and that's why you don't see this on the
That's my
screen.
point. There used to be a lot of problems with the leases. We're down to only these two. The second one might be taken care of when it's electronic, and it could kick out when it hasn't been done. So then we just have the first one here, which seems familiarity is breeding laxation, which isn't a good thing to do, because we need to have them sign.
Oh,
Again,
so a part of the signatory process is the certificate of insurance as well?
They have to have that in place before this is finalized, the lease is finalized.
Right, that's a separate, yeah.
Process.
Right, go ahead, keep going.
And
Right.
then our last item, again with huge improvement, has to do with segregation of duties with your key staff members in the internal control process. Probably the more common ones would be, we always ask that the school treasurer is not opening the mail. And that's improved tremendously. You still run across situations that are posted there, but much improvement. And again, I give total credit to Nancy's department and the training that they've provided on that. And I ask for any questions if you have them.
Well,
Mr. Chairman, I think we have another finding, which is a positive one. If you see on the hard copy of the book, which is the second finding, that positive one said we give credit to Mr. Burt's office and the accounting department because they were providing additional training. They putting on the new checklist for the principals, and all those are being captured in there. So we'd like Ms. Samuel to go through those with you. I think those are a critical one that may be a primary factor that the number of findings are
Where do we
going
find
down.
that? Where do we find it in the book, Mr. Chu? Hold it
Page
up so everybody
14.
can see.
Page 14.
Page 14.
Thank you. Page 14.
I'd like to say that your PowerPoint presentation explaining it was very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
As much, I mean, you guys, we've all been here for many years where we have to go through the chart and sort of discern this ourselves and pull it out. So, except for that one slide we didn't show us last year.
Sorry.
It's very helpful to see that. I mean, it's good to see the graphic as well, but it's also helpful for you to point that out and list it. Okay, so we're all on page 14, is that right? That doesn't make sense. 14?
Page 14.
Okay.
I would like Ms. Samuel to go through that with you.
She might not want to.
Before I go through that, I just wanted to give you a few stats.
Thank you.
In FY17, we had 33 new treasurers, and we had 5 treasurers on leave of absence for a length of time. In FY18, we had 35 treasurers new, with leave of absences of 8. I have to give a whole lot of kudos to my FAST team for all the training that they do and the stepping in that they do in order to keep the schools running.
Wow.
I have a couple of them are here. I have Penny Richter and Leslie Manella are here. And missing from them is Debbie Puig, Kim Cahant, and Suzanne Bush. And Mary Sue Bean, their supervisor, is here as well. Mary Sue Bean is in charge of doing she's been doing the trainings and all of that we have in ELM. And by golly, I think a whole lot of this is due to this team really digging in and keeping the schools on track.
Excellent. Appreciate it. Yeah. So less.
Can't do it without them.
Yeah. Less findings and better training. Excellent.
Yes.
Very good. Thank you.
But anyway, so the things that we have changed is the document custodian. We now have training for the document custodians. There were 7 modules back in 2017 when we first initially came up with the trainings, but we've reduced that down now to 4 trainings that give all the document custodians the instructions as to what they're supposed to do with each of their responsibilities. The drop safe log, as you know, we've had that in session now for a full year. We're working on our 2nd year. I'm happy to report out of, where's my stats? I had stats. 24,000 drop safe log pages. There were 3 missing.
Don't we call that the Barbieri procedure?
We do. But 3 pages. Okay.
Wow, that's
Sorry,
pretty
we don't
good.
have
That's
all
pretty-
of
that's
them,
great.
but, you know,
Wow.
I think that Jimmy Perret in Mary Sue's shop is also
Excellent.
responsible for taking care of that. So so that's a big improvement. Another thing that we did is we did send out a bulletin to the principals. We noticed that the principals were starting to take some of the sponsor training. And then we said, well, maybe we need to set up training just for the principals so that they know what they should be looking for. And so and let them know what the sponsors have been trained on. So we have a suite of training now for the principals. It's 5 courses, and it covers the gamut.
Wow.
It's way more information, and that's the comment that I get back is it's a whole lot of information. I'm like, well, this is kind of what you need to know in order to understand the finances that go on in your school. So so we have that now as well as, and we gave them a checklist, which is very lengthy, unfortunately. It's like a 5-page checklist.
Wow.
That they can just refer to. It's like a reference guide that they can refer to see what do I need to have when I have a fundraiser? What do I need to have to make sure that's happening? You know, it's a helpful tool. We hope they're using it. The other thing that we did change with Mr. Chu's advice was, and we got principals together to go through it, was that for items that they give away during a fundraiser, that if it's over $50, they need to document every person that they are giving these items to.
$50 aggregate?
Per item, $50 per item. So let's say they order these beautiful jackets, and they want to sell them. And if they don't sell them all, if they're going to give them to someone, they have to document who they gave them to.
Okay, per
Just so we
item.
can account for the cash.
No, I
you know,
understand. Okay.
The revenue.
Bad inventory. Good.
What else did I want to say? Oh, I wanted to mention that for the sponsor training, we have seen a drastic increase in completed courses. In FY17, there were 21,000 courses taken. In FY18, 22,500. And I'm happy to report that in 19, we're not even done with the year yet, we have 24,000 courses completed for the sponsors.
Wow.
So we see an uptrend in that. So hopefully if they know what they're supposed to do, they'll do it. I'm hoping
That's
next year will be
impressive.
good.
I'm thinking sooner or later this is going to be a revenue source. We're going to be able to sell this to other districts as modules. Like TED type thing, right?
Yeah.
We could get some revenue. That's excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you, ladies, also. Appreciate it. Yeah, the FAST team's amazing.
The FAST team is amazing.
Yeah, FAST team.
There's something you want to present, Lindsay?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Something
And
else?
then,
Yes.
if we're, I have to.
Yeah, we have another presentation.
Yes.
Let me just cue this up a little bit. So Nancy, on top of being a very accomplished CPA, is very savvy when it comes to our ERP system and technology and creating reports. And she's done a pretty amazing thing here to try recognizing that principals have a lot on their plate. She's created a new report that kind of gives them one-stop shopping so they can see where they may have tasks that need to be completed to get their finances in order.
Wow.
And it's a monthly report that gets pushed out to all of our schools. We did something similar a couple of years ago with the school's regular budget, their operating budgets, that was color-coded red, yellow, and green, and it would forecast out their budget for the remaining year to see if they looked like they might be overspending or have areas where they needed to monitor. So Nancy's kind of built on that and brought this into the internal accounts world, and I think you're going to be pretty impressed. It's we rolled it out to the principals at their monthly meeting in March, and it's already having an impact. That, Nancy, why don't you explain it for us?
Okay, so we call it the PFACT report, which is the principal's accounting, financial accounting current tasks. In the future, we hope to have a DFACT, which will be for the departments, but that's down the road. So this is basically everything that well, not everything, but it's most things that they would need to know that accounting is waiting for. So the bank reconciliations are due to accounting, to my FAST team, by the 20th of each month. Drop safe log, as we all know, is also due at the 20th of each month. So this report is going to tell them all these items. If they have invoices that are past due to accounting, that'll be listed. Unapproved payroll records, payroll reports to me as well. So if they haven't approved their payroll, that shows up on this report. Any assets not located during the year, that shows up on this report. If they have invoices that my accounts payable department has, but they don't have a receipt in PeopleSoft, so they can't pay it, those show up on here. And then all the training. Since we have all our training now, we give them a little snapshot of the courses that have been completed. So here is what a pretty one looks like. Everything is green. The principal has, so up on the top, this is, each section I'll have in a future slide. But anyway, this is a nice one. Green, Sunny Cove.
So this is populated automatically?
This is one that's got a stormy shore.
Wow.
What's that?
Nice.
So here you see red and lots of yellow.
Ah, yeah.
So happy. Here's things you got to do. Anyway, so each of the sections, I'm going to go through them relatively quickly. So here's our internal account. So if the bank reconciliation is late, it'll highlight and say not submitted. And then there's a task. The second page of this report has all the tasks. So it'll basically tell them, hey, go contact your person that needs to send it to us and get it sent in, please. Here's our invoices. So if they have invoices that are over 60 days, the number of invoices will be listed and the amount. And then on a separate page, they'll get a third page now. Instead of a 2-page report, they'll get a third page that actually lists all the invoices that are due. Payroll, if they have unapproved payroll records, we give them the path and we tell them what they need to do in order to get them up to date. Asset management, if assets have not been located, we do an asset inventory every year, which is required by state statute. We go out, I have a team of 3 staff that go out to every school and every department, and they inventory 180,000 assets every year. They go look them, they have to go touch them, they have to scan them, make sure that they exist. So we go to every school, and we usually get our numbers down relatively low. So, having 12 assets missing in 1 year is not that bad. A lot of times, believe it or not, we'll go back the next year and we'll find it. So we don't automatically just write them off after not finding them for 1 year, because it might be in a closet, it might be in a locked room, someone may have taken home a laptop and not brought it in. All sorts of things not missing for 1 year is not a big deal. I do like to find them all, but having 12 missing wouldn't be a big deal. The number that I'm always concerned with is the number that if we haven't found it in 3 years, we are going to report that to the board as missing. So we want to highlight to them that the number missing plus the number that are missing for 3 years. And down here, you'll see we give them an actual listing of the assets that are missing, so they can hopefully go find them, track them down, and then they can send us a picture of their tag. We have procedures for them to follow up with us. If they have a lot of assets, they can, we'll send our person back out there to go ahead and inventory it. Accounts payable, I had mentioned before, so if we have an invoice sitting in PeopleSoft and we can't pay it until someone says, hey, I got the goods, and enters a receipt, that will print out another page here that gives them a listing of what invoices we're waiting for a receipt. And now here's the training. So since we have, every time a new principal is hired, and all the existing principals were automatically enrolled in all of the trainings that I have for accounting. So if they see that they're red, I'm hopeful that they will say, oh, I better take my training. And then the next section there is for the sponsors in their school. That gives them an idea of how many people have actually taken the training. So I have no way to know how many people are doing the activities, so I have to leave it up to the principals to say, hey, that's a reasonable number. If they have 50 people doing fundraising, 13 is not enough. But that's going to be for them to, have to decide if that's adequate. I do want to have all my training for my document custodians. So at least one person on campus should have been trained. So that'll turn green if they've got their training. We sent out our first report in March, and we introduced it to them at the PLA. And then in April, we sent out our second report, and this is what our results were. We received 23,000 of late invoices, 64 invoices that were late were paid. We found 150 assets were resolved. 20 principals completed all their missing courses. 10 principals did from 1 to 4 courses, and the document custodians, what was that? Oh, and another 270 courses were completed by our sponsors and document custodians. Wow. So each month, I'm hoping to see, an improvement and be able to, show the differences between each period.
And I've received multiple emails from various principals just saying thank you for the report and how much they appreciate it and Nancy's efforts. It's made it really easy for them. It's pretty incredible how she's leveraged our ERP system to pull all this information. And the supporting detail, you can see, the missing assets, the invoices, and it all comes to them in one nice, concise report. So I think it's a great tool for the principal then to sit with their team and say, okay, and assign out to make sure those tasks get completed. So this should have a big impact.
And it takes, I would say, it takes 10 minutes to run the report. And it populates
10 minutes for all the
to do
schools?
all 175 schools. And it populates it into a folder in their budget directory.
I have a question. This is really, really exceptional. It's exceptional, but I have a question, not a but I do have an additional question.
Yes, sir.
Can you do exception reports
Meaning
from your
what?
main system? Like, I want to know, for example, what schools are delinquent with their payables?
Well, this is what's telling you that.
Yeah, but
But he
this
wants
is
to-
not by school, by pull them out, let me look at them. Who doesn't, like,
That actually,
an
the
exception
way this
report.
report works is I have one monster report.
yeah, I'm sure.
And it just feeds off each school by itself. So I have the detail all in one report.
So he wants to know what you
Yeah,
do with
but-
it. He wants to know what you do with
I
it.
mean, I'm thinking of using this as a tool somehow for an auditing function. I think this is great for your compliance on operations, for your schools and your principals. It's great for follow-up and making sure you're communicating and they're communicating back and doing what they should be doing. But as an auditing tool for this committee, if there's something that we want to look at, can we ask you for an exception report that would only show us who's not in compliance in a certain category?
Yeah,
Is your system that good to do that?
I could do that for
Yeah,
you.
you could do that. That's wonderful. That was the question.
Well, because that's what,
This-
the
Not a
report is
monster,
basically
not a
every
monster
exception.
report. And I'm not talking about a monster report of 175 pages,
Right.
times 3,
You would want
500
the, you
pages.
would want the totals of all of those.
You know, yeah,
Or an
a
exception,
select,
anyone
an
that has more than
select,
two exceptions to something.
whatever it is,
Right,
yeah.
that's what he's
Who
looking
who
for.
doesn't do bank recs time? Like, I don't know.
You're saying, okay, we got X number of invoices not paid timely. Give me a list of the schools that didn't have their invoices paid timely. Just those schools, not
I'll have to work a
170.
little more Excel.
Right, the question is,
We'll do a little
it's
something else,
Excel.
but maybe I'll,
It's Excel.
no,
No, it's,
hey,
No, no,
don't
no,
down my Excel.
Okay,
yeah.
I won't.
It's actually,
By
it's-
no,
Excel.
what she's saying is she's going to
That's what the
export
report
it.
is
She's going to
built in.
export the report there, and then Randy and Mr. Chu's office can say, we need that because we want to do spot inspections. That's what you would use it for, correct? Right, that's what Randy's thinking, right? Yeah, you just take that and you go to the schools that have the
Great.
problems and issues.
Yeah, I think that would be a good tool for us to do a compliance.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
That's what Mr. Dix is saying, right?
That's what I'm asking.
Well, she can do it. It's not a big deal she runs it. I assume you run it, and then you just create an exception report in Excel. It's no big deal. It just exports. Right, you just need to write the script to do it. Yeah, it's no big deal. That's smart. Yeah, that way they would work together. Very good. I'd like to know what RSM thinks about this type of report. And how many school districts do you guys have that have anything even close to this?
No, I haven't seen something like this that's all comprehensive in one, so this is good.
That's great.
I was thinking about sharing it with a couple of the local.
Well, we are
So
too.
we'll sell it to you.
Exactly. Yeah, we are too. We just haven't figured out what we want to ask for.
Yeah,
Right, Mr.?
Copyright this.
Exactly. No, I'm serious. This is something that I think,
all right, we'll figure it out.
exactly. Mr. Burke?
So prior to this report, so Nancy and her team were always working with schools to bring them into compliance. You know, if we had, I may send out communications on their behalf, if we had, let's say schools were getting behind on some of them doing their payroll approvals. So Nancy would generate a list and I would send that to the regional superintendents and the principals and say, hey, let's get it in line and, and the work gets done. We're trying, we've harnessed Nancy's powers here for good. And we're trying to, this tool is seen as, bringing a level of convenience to the principal to say, okay, these are all these tasks that need to be getting done at my school site. And if things show up in red, they know they've got an issue and they can go and get to the right person to get the job done. So my only caution, I guess, would be is, we're working to get our schools to a clean audit at the end of the year. And I wouldn't want to start hammering them maybe at periodic moments within the year. And we've done that. We try to work collegial and we work with their supervisors, and hopefully this report will lead to less issues. But I'd just be a little bit careful about taking a report at a moment in time and then saying, okay, you guys have now all of a sudden these schools have made the bad list and we're going to be punitive with it. But
You want to keep Mr. Dixon out of the school.
no, I think it's good information, and I don't know. I'm just trying to think it through.
Right.
It's been so positive since we rolled it out.
No, I'm just trying to understand this tool. This is dynamic.
Right, it's very good, right. Well, I think they're using it already.
Yeah.
You're using it for the schools, they give it to the supervisors of the schools to look at. Every principal has their own report, and the IG's office I'm sure can ask for the reports at any time, and that can highlight when they go out to the schools and look at things as well. So I hear you. I think they're on top of it. Very
Can I
good.
ask one more question? This is great. I love
Yeah,
it.
go ahead.
Does this go out every month going forward?
By the 10th of the
Does it go out automatically, or do they have to access it?
And the 10th, it
She
goes into a
populates it.
folder that they have access to.
Right, that's what she said. It
Oh, I see.
populates and it's in their
Populates a
folder.
PDF into
It does.
each
Yeah.
school's folder.
Right, and the supervisor gets it as well, I assume.
And it'll have all of it. So next month, they'll have 3 reports in there. They'll have March, April, and May.
And you could go in there and say who didn't open their reports?
I can't see who doesn't open it.
That's interesting. Okay.
But
Okay,
the
I'm done.
this
Just a question.
just still maybe to give you a little more comfort in that area, we've taken the regional instructional superintendents who do supervise the school principals and shown them this report, and they loved it as well. And they said this will be great when they do they're checking in at least once a month with the principal so they can, reference that,
Like a
see how
little
they're doing.
dashboard.
Yeah, it's a
Yes.
dashboard. Very
Thank you.
nice.
Thank you.
Very impressive. Thank you, Ms.
Thank you, Nancy.
Excellent.
Excellent.
Where are we in the agenda, Mr. Chu? I think that's it for reports, yes?
We have a couple more updates I want to give.
You have updates, right? Compliance assessment by the commission?
Number 6, update, yeah.
Right, number 6.1. You going to present that, Mr. Chu?
Yes,
Before we go on, can I ask a question, please?
I don't know if you're allowed to interrupt now, but okay, sure.
It has, Nancy, amazing, outstanding, exceptional work. Thank you. My question doesn't have to do with our schools. So we are doing an amazing job of bringing our schools into compliance and strengthening their internal controls, et cetera. And I guess this question really is more for Mr. Barbieri. And that is, we have charter schools that we're funding, and I think I asked a question once before about controls and what we do to ensure that they are also complying with the school district policies. And I think, Mr. Chu, you said that they do an audit, they have a financial audit done, but what about procedurally? Is there anything that, do they have to report to us? Do we look at anything? What is it that the school district or the school board requires other than just a reasonableness kind of financial audit from charter schools?
Let me just take the overall view, and then I'll get into detail. Overall, something you said isn't exactly right. I just want to be clear. The district isn't funding the charter schools. If anything, we receive a small 5% or something. We receive, I'm not saying it's good. We receive a little bit. The funding from the charter schools comes from the state.
Okay.
So it's not like the district, correct? And then we do have a contract with them. They have to perform, but the reason they're charter, and it's public knowledge, I'm not in favor of them in any great regard, is because they're choosing not to follow everything that we're doing here. That's why they went charter, because they think they can do a better job without the encumbrance of all these internal controls we're putting in. So we only have so much control over the charters. And that has to do with, and later John could talk about it a lot more than me, that only has to do with the contracts and the state and how much influence we could put on them at any one time. So it's not our money, and we don't have the right to go in there, like we have the right to go into every one of our schools anytime we want and create these reports and talk to them and supervisors. So the control is much less than we have with our schools, and that's a function of the state. And these people here will tell you, they give you the details a lot more. I just want to make that clear, that we're not being negligent on it. We only have so much control. Right. And over the years, what we've tried to do in this committee is work whenever they go to the state, and we've reviewed the charter contract or the sample of it or the legislation to try and give us as much power as we can to do what you're saying. But we're limited by statute of what we can and can't do. And that's why they are charters. So they don't have to deal with Ms. Samuels knocking on their door, or our Inspector General, and things like that. Go ahead, Mr. Buck.
There is a level of oversight. It's limited, but they do have to deal with us in some regards, and there's a monthly monitoring process.
Oh, yeah.
So we have members of my team that are looking at, they have to submit their monthly bank reconciliations and bank statements. They have to do the annual audit. They have to get an outside independent auditor, like we have RSM. They have their own auditors, and we get those reports. And they report their student attendance through us, and that's what generates the funding. The money passes through the school district, and we're allowed to withhold a small piece for our administrative cost. It does not cover it. We spend at least double what we bring in through that fee. And then if they have any federal grants, they have to work through us as well. And they're turning in those grant applications and drawing down the money, and we have to try to make sure they're in compliance in those areas.
But what about all these internal controls that we have in our schools?
We spend the most of the time here talking about internal accounts and fundraising, all that, and we really don't have any piece of that for a charter school.
Right. Nothing. We do get a financial audit at the end of the year. The financial audit is not done by our district.
Right.
It's not done by RSM. It's done by third-party. Independent CPAs. They have to be approved CPAs, and they do the financial report, and we found them in several cases significantly lacking. But there's only so much we could do about that, and we do. If you want, we could put on the agenda, we haven't had an update for a while, we can have the charter school department come in here, and you could ask some more questions about what it is we can and can't do and why, and what they'd like. And then what we do is sometimes we can go to our board and we talk to the attorneys here in the district, and we try and strengthen the oversight we have. Again, for the benefit of the students, so they're not at a facility that is just for profit or even not for profit, and the students are the pawns. So that's something that we're definitely concerned about, and there are issues there. There's no doubt about it. Yes, Mr. Burke.
Mr. Chair, while we're talking about charters, real quick, I'd like to get a public service announcement in. The legislature's in session. Our school board passed a referendum. Our voters passed it by over 72% last November.
Over by what percent?
72.37%.
Yes.
Supported it in Palm Beach County. So we levied a 1 mil property tax that's going to generate about $200 million a year for the next 4 years. It's allowing us to have a huge impact on improving teacher pay, adding police, mental health workers, and continuing our choice and fine arts programs. So there's legislation right now that's working its way through the House that would require the district, although we explicitly excluded charter schools in our ballot language, it would require that we share those funds.
Right.
So the school board took a position Wednesday night. We've got kind of what we call a call to action. We've got some information on this legislation and potential impact, and also some sample scripts for either phone calls or emails if people are interested in voicing their opinion to the legislature. So if the committee is interested, I'd be happy to forward that.
Yeah, could you
to Mr.
disseminate
Chief.
that through our
Jim.
secretary, and everybody will
Send
get a
it to the
copy of it?
committee?
Okay.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, Mr. Burke.
All right, thank you.
You have a follow-up question?
So the legislative document or whatever the bill that you're wanting us to support is to not provide a piece of that tax money to the charter schools, or to provide it?
No, we're opposed to the legislation. We think it's it really violates the will of our voters. That where 72% of people said approved the ballot language, and it was fully made clear that it was only for district schools, not charter schools. And so we have a big problem with this legislation that would go against the will of the voters. And it's the fact that it's retroactive. We passed a referendum based on the law that was in place at the time, and it's kind of unusual to go back and retroactively change the law and say, that ballot language no longer would be legal, really.
Well, if
that
you're going
you'd
to do a
have
grab, you might as well grab as much as you can.
Right.
I don't blame them. It's just that we need to, as you said, 72% read it and voted not to include the charters, and now they're trying
Becoming,
to...
as the funding for education in Florida, and you've probably heard me before, but we're 44th in the country and dropping, and there's been a lot of emphasis on tax cuts for the last 20 years in Tallahassee. So you now have 20 of the 67 school districts that went to their local voters to raise money, and that's used to be the response we get. We say, well, we don't like the state budget. Well, hey, you've got the power. Go to your local community.
Yeah.
So now that 20 districts have done that, I think it's become an issue now that charter schools want a piece of that.
Sure.
And we were the only county of the 20 that spelled it out explicitly that it was only for district, non-charter schools.
Okay.
In other counties, particularly Miami-Dade, it was less clear. And this legislation was filed by a representative out of Dade County who felt it was kind of deceptive because the school board and the superintendent were not entirely clear. That it was a little wishy-washy, would the charters share in the revenue or not. So I think that's kind of what inspired the legislation, but now it has potentially really serious consequences for us here.
Significant, I would think. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Mr. Chu.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
6.1.
Yeah, just want to give an update. We were reviewed by the Florida Commission on Law Enforcement regarding our investigation unit's accreditation. I just picked a copy of it in a beige color. The whole thing has 8 pages. So since it's a recommendation to the full commission, so I just want to save the time. I just print the last page for you, just an FYI, that they will be recommending us to the full commission in June for our accreditation for investigation.
Congratulations.
Wow.
Very nice.
Great.
It's a very, very stringent
nice.
and very rough review on their part. They sent in 3 persons. And the other good news is that on the whole stack, the white pages,
Yes.
on It's an accreditation, no, I'm sorry, this is a peer review result. You see on page 2, this is opinion letter telling us that they find no reportable instances of failure to meet the standards. So this is the one that for the opinion, and then that we're complying with the auditing standard, the yellow book, and also the Association of Inspectors General standards. They're going to have a management letter coming up, and we did meet with them. They give a very high remarks on auditing, investigation, and compliance, and other things. They do have some minor recommendations. So once we get it, we'll share with you all. Something that, like that, we need to update certain pages of our manual. Some auditing standards will be put into implementation in July this year, some of the next year. They want us to update our manual accordingly, so when the date comes. So we are doing it. So we will bring that to you when we receive the management letter. So these are 2 good news. And then I also have something since just a couple more minutes, nobody late. Joyce, can you help me to distribute this? This is a quick snapshot of where we are in our work plan for this year.
Thanks. That's crazy, man.
Right now, we are in the process of compiling comment from staff, senior staff, and our own staff regarding our next year's work plan. But I think it will be good that I give you a quick update of where we at right now for the ongoing work plan. I put a blue checks on those projects that have been completed, a red check for report preparation, and also in pink highlight for the field work, and also the green one for the planning. So we have pretty much completed most of it. Except 2 things that we are not able to come to, but we will carry them forward to next year. You see that a lot of the carry forward from 17, 18, they were either under report preparation or being completed. So I just want to let you know that we're working very hard on it. And right now, all my staff, they just completed the internal funds, and they are all in performance audit right now. And we are moving forward. So I think our staff, I'd like to congratulate our staff. They do a wonderful job. Internal funds audit is a mandatory requirement. We have to do it every year. We only have X number of months to work on due to the school will have the test exam period, and then also all the holidays. And so it's kind of hard to juggle so that we don't interrupt them. So I think we are doing as much as we can.
Very good. Thank you for the update. And congratulations, of course, on the peer review and also for the compliance assessment. Excellent. For the whole staff, of course. Yeah, I know. They were here and very, very thorough. I like that. Anything else? No? Okay, we have some reports just to review, correct?
Yes.
Number
for
7.
FI, yeah.
Next meeting is May 17th, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And as we're looking at the meeting dates, just wanted to let you know that June 20th, I have an annual conference and will not be here.
We'll take a look at it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for letting us know, May 17th.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
the agenda also has an incorrect date for the upcoming school board meeting. The May 8th meeting was moved to May 1st.
May 1?
That'll be the next school board meeting.
Okay, thank you.
I think the committee has not approved the internal funds report yet.
Oh,
Motion to approve the internal.
we need a motion to approve the internal funds report.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, passes unanimously. Thank you very much. And of course, thank you again for quality report. Any other business? Move to adjourn?
So, second.
All in favor? Thank you.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
No problem. My pleasure. This is good. Good meeting.